Hi, Karen. Right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Please feel free to continue to introduce yourselves in the chat, and ask questions as they may arise. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us during your lunch hour. Again, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat as people come in. My name is Anissa Colon. I am the program manager at Aurora Foundation. I'm joined by my colleague, Sarah Monson, who is our director of development. Jenny isn't able to be here with us today because she's currently being honored by the YWCA New Britain with their Women in Leadership Award. So I'll be leading today's meeting. I'm sorry? Oh. Jenny is a very busy woman, but I know she's with us in spirit. Um, so today marks the kickoff of Aurora's 2026 Giving Circle. This is our first session, and we're very excited to begin with learning from an expert in this field um, of supporting survivors of human trafficking. So over the next 2 weeks, we will also hear from three different organizations working directly to support survivors of human trafficking. So we're honored to welcome Yvette Young. Yvette is a licensed professional counselor with over 20 years of experience advancing equity, healing, and justice with a focus on combating human trafficking. As Vice President at the Village for Families and Children, she leads initiatives that support survivors and strengthen community responses. Her work spans statewide and national efforts centering survivors' voices and driving systemic change. She also has a TEDx talk, which you should all check out, and we're very grateful to have her here with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Yvette to share her presentation and begin.
Thank you, Anissa. Welcome, everyone. So happy to see so many of you on the call today. I have probably about a 25-minute presentation or so, and then we'll make sure that there's time at the end for questions that folks may have. I like an interactive presentation, so it's always cool when you're in person because it's a little bit easier. But there might be moments throughout the presentation I'll ask you to throw something in the chat just so that your other individuals on the call can see what folks are thinking or, get some different perspectives. So with that said, let's get started. So the first thing and the most important thing to talk about is the fact that the content that we cover for human trafficking is never easy. It's very difficult. And so that it's important that you take care of yourself. So if at any point you feel like it's too much, you need to take a breather or a break, please feel free to do so because your self-care is obviously of the utmost importance. So with that said, we'll dive in. With every presentation, when you have a topic very specific as this one is, it's really good to make sure that we all have a common understanding about what we mean when we say human trafficking. Okay. And so to lay that foundation, I like to use the federal definition that's in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And the definition there is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining a person for two reasons: sex trafficking or labor trafficking. When we're talking about sex trafficking, it's a commercial sex act in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age. So when we do say commercial sex act, we mean any sex act on the account of which anything of value is given to or received by any person. So this definition clearly says it does not have to be monetary. I don't have to give you $5 and ask you to perform a sex act for it to be considered trafficking. I can give you a pair of shoes. I could pay your rent. I could buy you food. As long as there's an exchange of something that has value for a commercial sex act, it's considered trafficking if there is force, fraud, or coercion. And that is only with adults. When you're dealing with minor children, anyone under the age of 18, if there's an exchange for sex for anything of value, it is automatically considered sex trafficking. So that's the distinction on that side. Unfortunately, on the labor side, you do have to prove force, fraud, or coercion for it to be considered labor trafficking for both children and adults. And when we talk about labor, we're talking about peonage, folks that came here with bondage, they have to pay back. We're talking about involuntary servitude, poor working conditions, underpaid, not paid, etc. And we see labor trafficking existing across multiple industries in the United States. And so it's definitely a major issue that has been focused on the adult side. And little by little, there's more information coming out for children who are being labor trafficked as well in the United States. The other one point I want to make is that when we're talking about human trafficking, we're also talking about a crime that happens here in the United States with domestic citizens, not just individuals who are foreign born and brought into the United States for trafficking. Majority of the work that I've done in Connecticut and the statistics that I've seen in Connecticut are for domestically born individuals. So I want to make sure I clarify that. So before I click to the next slide, there's three major high income illegal crimes in the nation. Where do you think human trafficking, so this is where the chat comes in. Where do you think human trafficking ranks in the top three? Take a second or two and just put 1, 2, or 3 in the chat. So Anissa, could you tell me like some of the numbers? Because I can't see
Oh,
that.
yes, of course. So we
Okay.
have two, one, two, two, one, one. I'm seeing a lot of ones and twos.
Okay.
One.
All right. So you guys aren't far off. You're really doing good. It ranks as the second largest and fastest growing criminal enterprise. Human trafficking generates $150 billion a year. I like to emphasize here that I personally feel like some of you that it's number one, because the number one is still drugs. Number two now is trafficking, and number three is guns. Um, but I really do feel like human trafficking is probably higher than drugs because when you're dealing with human trafficking, the product in this situation, which is what people will say, is a human being. Unlike a dime bag of weed or, pills or whatever else when you're talking about drugs. And the reality and the sad reality, though, is for human trafficking victims, you can sell that person more than once. So when you think about the income you make and the amount of people that can be victimized in this crime, it is so high. The problem is, unlike the war on drugs and the sort of resources that have been dumped into managing drugs in the communities, the same level of scrutiny and attention hasn't been put on human trafficking. And if it was, I think we would see that become number one in the nation. Um, so major issue that we have to contend with as a society. So human trafficking is really the business of selling freedom for profit, period. Right? You are taking human life and you are selling it for your own profit and for your own gain. So when we talk about sex traffickers, we're talking about individuals for both sex and labor trafficking who target victims when and they target vulnerable victims. I want to be clear about that. These are individuals that hold some level of vulnerability. And we'll talk about risk factors a little bit. It's a couple of slides down. But these are vulnerable individuals that traffickers will prey on. And once they're able to lure them into their web, let's say, they use violence, threats, lies, false promises, debt bondage, or other forms of control and manipulation to keep victims involved in the sex and labor industry for their own profit. One of the things that I was surprised to learn as I started doing this work years ago was that traffickers, have online universities that they call like pimp universities, where you can go and learn about how to control and manipulate and manage other human beings to do what you want them to do for profit. And so you think about the fact that there is this like sort of organized mindset around how to do this well. And then you're talking about children that are being trafficked. You talk about adults who are being trafficked and how these individuals use that information and knowledge to be able to get their victims to do what they want. And when that isn't enough, if coercion isn't enough, then they go to violence, and violence, threats of violence will keep someone in line to continue to do what it is that you're asking them to do. Because when you see the impact this crime has on the lives of an individual, there's not a choice that anyone is making to stay in this situation. They're being forced. So buyers. We can't talk about trafficking without talking about buyers. And Demand Abolition, if you want to check out their website, did a report on buyers and why people buy. And these are three of the key components that I thought I would share with you guys from that report. So they had what was considered high frequency buyers, who are the ones who purchase the most sex, but they're a small percentage of the population of men who buy. So about 25% of active buyers purchase weekly or monthly, and they're considered high frequency buyers. Of those 25% of individuals who buy, they account for nearly 75% of the market transactions. Small number of buyers, but high number of transactions because they're buying frequently. When it comes to high frequency buyers, demographic traits are important predictors for sex buying. Race, sexual orientation have almost no profiling power. So buyers can look like anyone, belong to any religious association, work in any field, have various sexual orientation. All of those dynamics, those demographics do not factor in. This is something like, just like the traffickers could be anyone, your buyers can be anyone as well. But one caveat that this research really then drove out, that sort of made it go, whoa, this makes a lot of sense, is that for the current high percentage frequency buyers, that they likely make more than $100,000 annually. So then it makes it now like, so those who are frequently buying are very affluent men. And so that was something that was, interesting to see come out of this research. So very affluent men. When you watch a lot of the human trafficking videos, married men come up often as a demographic that are buying and are participating in potential trafficking rings. So when we talk about the victim, who are we talking about? And so this is sex trafficking in the United States by race. And I would say it's still very equivalent on the labor side as well. The majority of victims of this crime are people of color. So as you can see by this graph, you have your Latino population and your Black population makes up the majority of the population of victims. Then you also have your Asian population and your white Caucasian population. Who are also listed here as victims. The sad part about this graphic is that it does not include Native people, and Native Americans are trafficked and are sex trafficked at an alarming rate. And so this is a national data, and it really still left out a major part of our community, which is Native people. So I make it my job when I do my presentation on race and racism and human trafficking to make sure I highlight the Native community and what they've been through historically and what they currently continue to struggle with as a community around human trafficking. So that's the buyer, the trafficker, and the victim. Let's start looking at the dynamics. But before I dive into the pathways and looking at risk factors, and this is another opportunity to engage in the chat. Brene Brown, her vulnerability research, and I'm sure everybody knows who Brene Brown is at this point. She did a research on vulnerability and she took that results and then she's just been doing speaking engagements ever since. But in her research, she mentioned that one of the things that she stumbled upon was this idea that when we're confronted with very difficult information, a difficult situation, our brain has a way of filling in details and gaps. to allow us to be able to understand or make sense of the issue if it
Hobby
doesn't make
Lobby.
sense to us. So human trafficking is one of those issues that's very difficult to comprehend, very difficult to absorb. And so one of the questions that I ask when I present is, what is the story? So your brain has made up a story to deal with vulnerability issues. What is the story you tell yourself about human trafficking? So just quickly in the chat, and Anisha, if you could just say a few of them out loud. What is the story you tell about human trafficking? And I'll tell you what I've been hearing as I do these presentations. So what's the story you tell yourself?
Running, runaways being picked up and drugged. It can't happen to me or someone I know.
Mm-hmm.
It happens and it's just awful for victims and families, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
happen here.
Okay.
Vulnerable people in need of resources.
Okay. So I think one more came in and then I'll
Yeah.
proceed. Go ahead.
Young people are particularly targeted and primary young girls.
Okay. So the story that we tell ourselves, or the story I've heard many people tell themselves, is this: not my child. So if you're a parent, not my child, or not my family member, and not my community, right? The reality is that human trafficking does not discriminate. As I said before, just like with the traffickers and the buyers, this is not a crime that discriminate based on race, belief systems, affluence, poverty, etc. It's equal opportunity under the sun for someone to be trafficked. And so the story we tell ourselves, like, not my child, not my family, not my community, that keeps us in this place of vulnerability because the reality is it could be your child, it could be a family member, and it is not, could be, it is happening in your community. When I did work with the Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team through DCF, I used to do the data collection, and in every region of the state of Connecticut, there were trafficking victims or victims who were at high risk of being trafficked, right? So this is a backyard issue. It's not a like, oh, it's a New York issue, it's a LA issue, it's a Connecticut issue. And we definitely need to pay very close attention because if we're not informed and we're not educated, we're not educating our children, we're not educating our family members, their level of vulnerability increases and their likelihood of being victimized increases. So I think that's important to understand. So let's quickly look at pathways for human trafficking. How do people get lured into this life? How does this even happen? So the information that I'm sharing with you moving forward is a combination of issues with children and adults. So a lot of the same venues and opportunities exist. Some might be more child specific, some might be more adult. But when we talk about internet-based as a pathway, 70% of 70% of traffickers recruit, especially for children, online. And so we know that online apps, chat rooms, etc., dating sites, all those sites are places where kids and adults could potentially be groomed into being trafficked, right? 70% of recruitment happens there. There's a trafficker who told his story once and said, he sent a friend request, so talking about like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever you want to call it, sends a friend request to a bunch of kids in a middle school and waited to see how many of them would respond back. And a lot of them did because their sense of safety goes out the window when they're on these platforms. And all he had to do was, at some point follow them back, learn as much as he can about them. And then when he's ready, he'll slide in their DMs and just say, hey, it seems like you're having a bad day at school, or hey, it seems like, you have similar interests that I do. Let's talk. Let's meet up. And then before you know it, they're chatting privately, and then they're asking the child to meet them someplace. And before you know it, the child is now being trafficked and abused. So the internet definitely. You have adults, as I was talking to workers who staff who works with adult survivors, you may have someone who's posting themselves online to try to make money, and then someone else intervenes in that and decides, well, I can do it for you better, or I can be your safety mechanism while you're doing this, and then that person then exploits the individual. So different, age groups, different realms, different tactics. but still a major foundation for victimization. You have stripping as a gateway. You have pornography as a gateway. We've told a story through DCF of a 15-year-old girl whose mom was taking images of her, naked images of her, and sending them to a man in California. And then the guy in California was like, "Well, why don't you send your daughter to me, and I could take the pictures myself." And mom did. The guy sent her a ticket and she sent her child to California. The child went missing for about 9 months before she was able to be recovered. And during that time period, she was trafficked. So people are like, well, it's just an image. It's not that dangerous. It very much is dangerous and it is a gateway. You have individuals children and adults who are posted as escorts, and escort services are not supposed to have sex as a component of it. But when you look at escort ads, that's all they're sort of advertising. And that's another way for individuals to know who to buy and solicit for sex. And oftentimes there's a trafficker attached to those ads. You have casinos and clubs, private party, school parties. So one of the things we were learning at one point in the work was that you have high school students who will throw parties when their parents are not around or wherever in the community. And that they would then tell folks, if you bring drugs or alcohol or whatever, let's say the guy who's throwing the party has a girlfriend, I'll make my girlfriend perform a sex act on you if you bring these items, right? And the reality is, as long as it's a minor, when we go back to the definition and there's a change to the sex act, it's considered trafficking. So that student or that boyfriend is a trafficker in that situation because they're selling this particular child or girlfriend for something of value. So that was a serious issue that was surfacing at one point in our data. We have interfamilial trafficking, which is the sale of a family member. So parents selling children, it could be adults being sold into trafficking. And these cases account for about 30% nationally of human trafficking cases, so a really high percentage. In the state of Connecticut, the youngest victim on record, which is a 2-year-old child, was an interfamilial case. His uncle was selling him to men for money. Um, we have what we call survival sex, which is when we have individuals who are homeless or out on the streets, have no resources, and the decision to engage in sexual acts for money is on the table. And sometimes that's where your traffickers will come in and say, "I'll protect you. I'll make sure you're taken care of. I just need you to do this for me." And then they're being abused and victimized that way. Sex for drugs, we see drug as a major gateway and a major reason why folks stay. Gangs are getting involved in human trafficking because of the financial elements that come with it. You have marriage trapping. So only recently, within I think the last 2 or 3 years, Connecticut passed a law that you have to be 18 or older to marry. Before it was 16. You could be 16 years, I think, yeah, up to age 16, and you would have to have parental consent. And so this became a human trafficking reality because if we talk about interfamilial trafficking, you can have a parent who's selling their child to whoever this person is to marry. And what we were not seeing through the data, these weren't 15 and 16-year-olds marrying each other or same age mate. You're talking about adolescent age girls marrying men in their 30s and above. So there's definitely pause there around, and that was why it was a big push to change that limit to 18. And then we talked about labor trafficking as a gateway as well. So let's look a little bit about the risk factors related to human trafficking. So food insecurity, anything that has a poverty element to it where there's not enough or sufficient means is a gateway because someone will come alongside and try to say, "I can offer you that or I can help you in that realm." And so it makes someone extremely vulnerable. So food insecurity, housing instability, family rejection, we see, and when we talked about, when we did presentations for LGBTQ youth, a lot of family rejection issues came up with that population, making them homeless, making them highly vulnerable for trafficking. Someone with a mental health diagnosis that's untreated is a definitely vulnerability factor. Intellectual disability, we had a case I think it was in Danbury where a man had sort of recruited a bunch of, I believe they were homeless young men with intellectual disability that he then started to sell to men in his community, very affluent communities. History of abuse, especially sex abuse, is a predisposition. Child welfare, juvenile justice involvement, substance dependence is a major factor. Domestic violence and IPV is a major, especially when we're talking about adults, a major pathway for trafficking. Family or friends involved in trafficking. So if it's been normalized in your family unit, or you know folks who are doing it and they make it seem like it's not a big deal, that could be another pathway for children or adults. And then we know very clearly undocumented or temporary immigration status is a huge vulnerability because either you don't have your documentation, someone is holding on to your documentation, and so you have very limited resources to turn to without being threatened to be sent back home. And we don't know what that environment might be for that individual. So it definitely puts them in a high risk situation to comply with a trafficker when they make their demands. So I want to share with you this Connecticut case just to sort of drive home the reality of what our trafficking victims are going through. So this was a 15-year-old adolescent child who was in the life, and when I say in the life, I mean being sex trafficked for over 315 days, 1 year. She had a quota, which the trafficker will set for each person that they have that they're trafficking. And she had to engage with 20 buyers per night, and her nightly quota was $1,000. So she had to bring $1,000 back every night to her trafficker. If she didn't bring that money back, we all know what's probably going to happen. There's going to be violence, abuse of some sort. And so one of the other offshoot of the conversation in this movement is when they can't meet the quota, so now they're committing crimes or doing, theft or whatever to get the money to get to the trafficker so that they don't have to deal with the consequences of not making enough money for the night. So you can see all the different offshoots, and this is why there's been a lot of legislative movement around, when crimes are committed because the person is being trafficked, can those crimes be erased from their record because it was done under distress? So we have this young child, 20 buyers per night, which equaled to 6,300 sexual assaults, totaling 315,000 tax-free dollars for her trafficker. All of which she kept none of because this is not a mutual agreement. This is not a choice. This is not, we're going in this together. This is, you're going to do what I tell you to do, and you're going to bring me the money back, and I'll give you whatever minimal resources I want to give to you for your survival, but the money is mine to keep. And so she was obviously recovered after the 350 days and brought into treatment. But can you imagine the level of trauma she experienced over those 350 days with that many buyers each night? So let's talk about the impact to the victim. So in the chat, this is where we're going to engage again. In the chat, tell me what you see. First, tell me how. First thing is this: is this one person or two people or multiple people? What's the age that you feel the child is in the beginning versus the end? And then tell me some of the other attributes that you see in the pictures.
Hmm.
So no one wants to guess age?
Not seeing it. Okay, age. I'm seeing 12 to 15, 16. It looks like she's being drugged as she gets older. All of the girls are of color. One child starts at age 9, ends at age 16. The same girl showing the impact over the years, starting at 14. I'm seeing another 14. Same person, 15. Um, at the start, 16 at the end, drugs, abused. Um, yeah,
Okay.
a lot of 14 to 16.
So these are mugshots. This is a New York case, but these are mugshots of the same girl. And when they arrested her, she lied and said she was 18. And the police officers believed her, which is daunting because any of us looking at her could tell she's not. In the first picture, she's 14 years old. And these mugshots were over, I think it was 18 months. So by the end, she was 15. So not a long period of time. And as I think mentioned before, definitely drug addiction. You can see it in her face and in her eyes, especially. Definitely abuse. You can see, I think she has a black eye in one of the pictures. Um, and then the other thing that I always point out to people is look how well groomed she is in the first two pictures, even the third one. So somebody was taking care of her. So when you think about the grooming phase, when you think about this person might have been lured in, someone was pretending that they were going to be taking care of them and making sure their needs are met. She had that going on for her. But then as you can see, as the victimization happens over time, there is no more like, here, go get your hair done, or make sure you're taking care of your hygiene or any of that stuff. It's just go and work and that's it. And then the other thing that I think is noteworthy in this in these series of pictures is her complexion. It is the same child. But as you can see, as the pictures go along, her complexion lightens. Um, and just to save time, one of the reasons why that's happening is this is not a child that's being exposed to the sun on a regular basis. She's not outside playing with her friends. She's not, going to school and then hanging out after in the community. Her exposure to sunlight is limited because she works usually at nights. And so in the daytime, she's sleeping. If she's a child that has been, lured out of her home and out of her community, she's being kept hidden and isolated so no one starts to ask questions and try to figure out who she is, or it also limits her ability to talk to anyone else about who she is and that she's being victimized. So that change in complexion is another major red flag for this young woman. So you could see that this is not, I mean, sometimes people glamorize this lifestyle and thinks that it's something that is, a choice that folks are making. When you see these types of images, when you know the impact it's having, that choice conversation goes right out the window. So here are some clear damages to the victims that we've seen and that, staff in the field have noticed. Substance abuse problems or addictions. And oftentimes, I mean, it's like the chicken or the egg, right? Did they have a substance abuse issue and then therefore ended up in a life of trafficking, or were they in a life of trafficking and then built an addiction? And one of the things that we have seen is that traffickers will drug their victims so that they can perform all these 20 sex acts that they want them to do on a regular basis, right? Until that they can get through the pain and trauma of what they're dealing with, they'll drug them. And obviously, as a result of that, they become addicted to those substances and then needs them. And then that becomes one of the ways that they keep them captive is that if you want your drugs, if you want this, and you have to keep doing this for me. So that's one of the processes that we see unfold in this work. Psychological trauma from daily abuse. I think that's self-explanatory. As we said in the beginning, the use of force, fraud, and coercion is real. The use of violence is real. And so that psychological warfare for victims is great. We have medical problems. So if someone has a predisposition for a medical issue, this is not someone who's going to be getting routine follow-up care. So whether it's dental or medical, they're not going to a regular doctor. They're not going to clinics because the reality is that they need to be hidden. And so exposing them to those systems is not a smart move for the traffickers. So they will not, follow up in those instances. And so the result is that this individual now is at high risk. A lot of bruise, scars, and branding. You have traffickers who will brand their victims. There was a series of cases in the Willimantic area where they were doing the barcode on the back of the necks of the girls, and then the trafficker would have their initial or name attached to that. There was a trafficker who initialed a money sign in the face of one of the young ladies to demonstrate that that's all she was worth. and her value. You have bruising and scars because not only is the trafficker abusing them, but the buyers do as well. There was a case where a mom was sort of appealing to the national on a federal level for some legislative changes because her daughter was murdered by the buyer one Christmas Eve because the daughter refused to do a free sex act for the individual and he murdered her in his garage. So not only are they at risk by the trafficker, but also by the buyers as well. We've had girls who've had burn marks on their back from being pushed up against hot radiators and the gamut goes on and on. Obviously, in all cases, protection is not being used, so sexually transmitted diseases is a reality that a lot of trafficking victims have to deal with. Unwanted pregnancies and then forced abortions is a part of that equation as well. Traffickers will do whatever it takes to have the female lose the fetus. And so definitely high risk there for victims. Dental problems, infertility as a result of those, the STDs as well as the forced abortions, and so much more that we may not even know about or have heard about, but the impact is massive. And I would say on a spiritual, physical, and emotional level, our individuals of trafficking are being impacted. So what are some of the reasons why someone may not be able to get out of the life and ends up feeling trapped? Or, people are like, well, no one is chaining them up, no one is holding them, at gunpoint. Why don't they just leave? And it's a question that people ask for DV as well. And it's not a simple situation. And we know that these are complex issues and complex trauma. So when we talk about this, it's important to understand trauma bonding is a part of the equation. So, the person making them feel like, they love them and they care for them and that, whatever is happening is just momentary, but they're going to make sure that they're okay. And you see in the power cycle dynamic with DV, it's like you have the honeymoon stage and then you have the abuse and then it goes back to the honeymoon and the cycle just keeps going. And the victim is always desiring and willing to see that stage come back, the honeymoon stage come back, that they're going to be that person that groomed them right into this life where they gave them things and showed them love and value. And that cycle just keeps repeating where it never really ever goes back there. Fear of leaving because they've been threatened that they will kill them. Or if they know about their family or where their family resides, that they'll kill or threaten to hurt family members. Being blackmailed, we've had cases where individuals have videos taken of them doing sex acts or, nude pictures of them and being told, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to release these tapes or I'm going to release these images to the internet, to your family members, to your school. And that's a major reason why. And it's also one of the reasons why many victims take their own lives because of that level of threat and fear if it actually occurs. Criminal records related to the exploitation. So they're finding that it's difficult to get employment and to work because of the criminal records that they've had based on being trafficked. That could keep someone in the life. They owe a debt to the person that they are having to pay back, but feels like they can never ever keep up to pay it back. Lack of access to housing. So we talked about, risk factors of instability and insecurities. So housing is a factor. The lack of mental and physical health services that they may need, difficulty finding and holding a job with adequate pay, is another dynamic that could keep someone in the life. Because yet again, if someone is taking care of me, even if it's not even at the level it should be, maybe it's better than if I'm trying to do it on my own and can't find success in doing it. Lack of education, lack of safe, trusted, or healthy community, and then the stigma and shame that is naturally attached to this level of victimization. So these are just a few. If you engage with survivors, you will hear these and probably many more. But I just wanted to give you guys a sampling of some of the reasons why someone doesn't just walk away like everyone thinks they should. So solutions and interventions, I felt like it was important to really wrap this up with what can be done. I praise the Aurora Givens Circle for putting this presentation together, for choosing human trafficking as, the funding um, sort of entity for this year, for folks wanting to be able to stand in the gap and support, or folks being able to want to walk alongside survivors and victims and, support in any way. So there are ways in which we have, great organizations doing really good work with survivors that have, proven to have success with getting individuals out of the life and staying out of the life. And these are some of the intervention strategies when I, spoke to folks they were able to leverage, and these are across both, age groups. And that is building trust in relationships is essential because oftentimes those weren't there. People lied to them, manipulated them, convinced them. So when they have someone who doesn't want anything from them, isn't trying to get them to do anything, but all they want to be is there to be supportive to them and understand that those relationships are normal and healthy, that is a healing mechanism. Receiving the support needed when it's needed, so whether it's housing, basic needs, etc., having someone helping to make sure that that can happen for the individual is a major intervention. Trafficking informed clinical services came up a lot, and really the importance of having clinicians trained in trafficking, human trafficking, understanding it as a crime, understanding it as a form of victimization, so that when they do get trafficking victims, they understand sort of what they've been through. And it's not just about being trauma informed, because that's one realm, but then also understanding this level of victimization. Providing basic need resources, which across the board is always a need. Walk alongside them and be an advocate for them, right? So a lot of folks doing this work, it's not a one and done, we're going to give you this and then you're on your own, but it truly is walking alongside. It's advocating when they need someone to have a voice for them, when they feel voiceless or not sure how to articulate or how to get their immediate needs met, is important. Internet safety training, especially when it comes to children, around how to stay safe while online, what to look out for, how to, sort of spot a predator when they're coming for you, how not to disclose all your personal information, how to keep certain things private, that whole nine. Like kids need to understand that. Parents need to understand some of the secret apps and resources that kids use that can potentially lead to their victimization. So, safety training for both sides, the parent and the child, is important. Raising awareness about risk factors. So, doing trainings like these, doing community-based trainings, those are all critically important. I'm big on prevention versus intervention, right? I think we spend a lot of times just intervening after victimization. We do need to spend a lot of time also on the prevention side, trying to prevent these crimes from happening by educating our community, our kids, our parents, so that they, have a better chance of sort of changing the trajectory for their child. Peer support, so having, lived experience individuals being able to support each other. So the Underground New England has a survivor mentorship model, where, you have someone who has lived experience who's helping someone else to get out of life and supporting them because they understand what that journey is and can be supportive in that way. So that's a major piece of the puzzle as well. Obviously, financial assistance whenever there's a need for rent or housing or food or whatever it may be. Someone coming out of life and is not going to have the financial resources to get on their feet. And so sometimes that is what will fit in, help to fill the gap. And then the last one is livable wage employment. So when they are trying to get employed and get resources, not having to settle for employment that is making them underpaid. And so therefore they have to find other ways to make up the resources that they need. So livable wages is definitely a solution to the problem. All right, the last thing I want to show you, and then we're going to go into question and answers, is a spoken word video that was done by Love 146. It's one of my favorite videos out there around human trafficking, and it's just really about talking about being a victim to the point of becoming a survivor, and I think it's very powerful. I like to have survivor voices or perspectives included in any of the presentations that I do, and so this is one of the ways that I can introduce that voice into the room. After this, I will stop sharing and we can have a conversation.
worthless, dumb slut, faggot, punk. They called her number 146. Maybe you know the sting like razor blades. Maybe the desire to disappear, it resonates. Maybe you too know the feel of forgettable, that ache that lingers inside you like the taste of a last cigarette on the tongue, like the pain in your body because the work is never done. Maybe you know the sound of your dreams being crumpled into the dollar in someone else's jeans, like when your parents or your friend or the man down the street tried to pimp your self-esteem. At first, they called you pretty. Then they called you weak, good for nothing, never be worth much. Every syllable in your beautiful name and the story behind it exchanged for slurs. They've broken down your spine, sanded down your shine, and branded you with their labels. Next, they'll put you in a box to put you on the shelf, hoping you'll be picked before your expiration date, but your soul is not damaged goods. We won't be fooled by those who only care about us long enough to make money off us, make us packageable, profitable, those who treat people like products, turning children into chattel, the vulnerable into victims, and maybe you've been told you deserve this. That this is all you'll ever get, so shut up and be happy. Be happy somebody wants you. But you will not be happy with bare minimums. You will not be bought and sold at a discount. Don't count your past against you. A few mistakes just gives your skin that human hue that says, I've been put into dark places and did not stay there. So don't dance in their dark rooms. Don't pose for their cameras, because your portrait's worth 1,000 words, all more beautiful than the ones you were told. Irreplaceable, unconquerable, unstoppable. You might be fractured, but unlike a fraction, you cannot be reduced. Tell them. My life is not mathematics. I'm not a statistic, not a hashtag, not a price tag. I am not a number. I have a story. A story that includes love. And survival is just the beginning. I don't have all the answers or any easy solutions, and I don't really know how this ends. But your story is yours. It's what's behind the eyes and cannot be commodified.
So to close, this is a National Human Trafficking Hotline, so that if you ever have any suspicions or concerns and you need to make a phone call, they have the call, then they have a text messaging option. This is also used by victims and survivors as well. And then they also have a very strong online presence, which will give you even more information and resources related to human trafficking. So with that said, thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up for any questions anyone has.
Great. For questions, you can either type them in the chat or feel free to unmute.
Hi, I have a question. Um, I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but um, I was talking to a friend recently who's like, high up in a local organization, and she was at some like business lunch, and a bunch of legislators were there, a bunch of business people, and the man presenting said something like offhand, like, well, I mean, we know the Epstein files don't really matter, or like something along those lines. I don't
Mm,
remember what the exact quote was, but I'm thinking about that and how you said it, like, there's no exact demographic, but men who make over $100,000 are the worst of the
mhm.
worst. Like, what do you do about that? Like, what we've seen obviously at this national level with like the the rot of this at the core of like very, very, very powerful institutions and groups of people. And thank you so much for your presentation and like the work you're doing. I don't know if there's an answer to this, but like, what do we do about this, like as
I
a
mean,
society?
no, I think you're right. If you can see the cover up happening with the Epstein file, right? And you're talking about multi-millionaire individuals, 900,000 K annually individuals. So that's a systems issue that needs more regulations, more prosecutions, more arrests, to really send the message that this is unacceptable behavior. We're not going to tolerate in our society. The reality is that we're not where we need to be as a society when it comes to issues of sexual abuse and assault. We're not where we need to be when it comes to issues related to victimization of women, right? What are the messages that young boys receive as they're growing up around what's right and what's acceptable? How many of those young boys get excused for bad behavior depending on the family units they come from and give permission to the behavior so that they can continue to replicate themselves, right? There's so much. And the only way that you feel like you have any control is how do I control the environment immediately around me? What is the messaging in my household? What is the messages within my family unit? What can I do to make a difference and have an impact, right? What is in my sphere of influence? Because that's all I have control over. And hopefully, as more people with knowledge and information and that mindset starts to saturate and infuse into the system, we can create a better environment and a better sort of social construct that won't allow for this to be acceptable behavior. Thanks for that question.
So something that comes to mind is, whether we're engaged with significant others who are men or women, um, and whether we think we're with the best men or women on the planet and we're in good relationships. The first thing that comes to my mind today is that was an absolutely, I'm going to cry, but powerfully, beautifully executed presentation, Yvette. And I think I can speak for everybody that this has really, you cut, I don't think there will be so many questions because you covered so much. But I think the first thing we can do is share it, is
Mm-hmm.
share your presentation with absolutely everybody we intersect with. And that one can't help but see this and not talk about it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
One can't help but share your work. And so whoever we're intersecting with, I think we start with sharing Yvette's work. And as you say, that's that immediate, what's in my sphere, what can I control
Mm-hmm.
in my zone of influence, if you will. And thank you.
And I think what I was, thank you so much for your kind words. I think what I would say is that what we've seen in data is that when we do awareness work, when we do educate communities, we're finding more victims, right? We're identifying more survivors. So sometimes you go like, oh, it's not going to make a difference that I talk about this, or oh, it's not going to make a difference that I, went to that training. It really does. Data has shown that the more informed our community is, the more able they are to identify victimization when it's happening, the more likely they are to intervene early enough, maybe before a child becomes victimized. So I really want to echo that sentiment wholeheartedly. Share, and share some more because knowledge is power. Our kids need to be empowered. They need information to protect themselves. Adults who have not ever been told or taught that certain behaviors are unacceptable behaviors need to be taught as well. So please do not underestimate the power you have because every single one of us on this call have a network of people tied to us. And imagine the reach that we can have if we all just paid it forward. I saw some stuff in the chat, but I couldn't read it. But is there any questions in the chat or anyone
Mm,
else who wants to ask
Mainly
a
just
question?
a lot of echoing. We have a thank you for the wonderful presentation, and then just teaching boys and men. Um, yeah. Any last
And
questions?
remember, I'm going to say this. Boys are victims too. So we
Mhm.
also don't want to lose them. One of the problems with boy victimization is that it doesn't look like girls the way girls manifest. And so sometimes they're overlooked. And we still live in a society where, when you see even those cases where you have female teachers have an inappropriate sexual relationship with their students, you see in comment sections, go you, he must be lucky. I wish that was me when I was growing up. So there's still so much stigma and so much shame attached to, young men or boys claiming victimization. And then we do have women who are traffickers, and we have women who are recruiters and who facilitate this behavior and activity. And so this is one of those crimes where we see the gender indifference because the majority of victims that we've seen are women, but it's really one of those nuanced crimes where both men and women are making this happen in our society. And both men and women, including boys and girls, are being victimized at the same level.
Absolutely. We have someone echoing your words in addition to sharing and having conversations, thinking about what concrete action like we can do, working with Aurora or the different orgs that we're going to be hearing from in the next 2 weeks. Um,
And as I said, just
yeah,
living circle alone is a blessing. The fact that you guys are gathering and you're looking at how can you take whatever resources you have financially and pay that forward to these smaller providers and communities, that in itself is a blessing. Um, and that's why I said, you don't have to be doing the work directly to have an impact and to make a difference. And I think this circle alone is a step in the right direction.
absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and we also have some other people echoing like women can obviously also be perpetrators, Ghislaine Maxwell. Um, And then just other people thanking you for your presentation. But yes, this is definitely a really good starting point for everyone to be in, for working and learning about how to best support human trafficking survivors. So we hope that you all will join us again next week. We'll actually be hearing from Love 146, um, who produced that video that we just
Mhm.
watched. And yes, all of these sessions will be recorded, and shared with you all, early next week. And you can definitely please share these recordings. Please invite your friends to join and be a part of this community. You can be as active or inactive. However, again, like I said, these are all recorded. So if you watch them asynchronously, that's totally okay. Um, but yeah, any other questions, please don't feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, we're very excited to continue this amazing work. We'll be hearing from Love 146 and Siri Project Rescue next week, and we'll be hearing from another org the week after that Yvette mentioned earlier at the Underground. And they all do incredible work, and we're very excited to continue building this community.
Mhm. I think someone just said that this reminds me that my anger isn't an iceberg. I like that.
Yes, this is where to channel the anger. I know like this can feel really overwhelming. Just kind of echoing what Rachel was saying earlier, especially with everything in the news. And it's like, well, how do we address that? And it's in our own communities, it's in our own circles. Um, and I just think this work is really powerful, and you all showing up here is a part of what makes that. Yeah.
Well, if anyone has any questions or any follow-ups, feel free to reach out to me um, via email. My email address here at work is yyoung@thevillage.org. And I'll answer any questions that you may have or send you in the right direction if you're looking for additional resources I don't have. So I appreciate, as I said, for me, doing these presentations is a blessing because I feel like I'm paying it forward. And so I'm always grateful when individuals show up to hear the message. So I do want to just express my gratitude for all of you taking your lunch break today to come and listen to this message.
Thank you all so much
Thank
for
you.
joining. I will see you all next week.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
I